Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. In the last episode, we introduced the first book of the trilogy, which John wrote, The Librarians. In this episode, we will share an excerpt from the first chapter. Few years ago, a church member asked me how many books did Pastor write. I smiled. That time it seemed like each month there was something new, but people may not be aware that John had been working on The Two Fathers, the second book of the trilogy, years before. Then, during his illness, he started working on The Librarians and the Newells in the span of 2 years. Well, as you know, authors take time and work very hard on their masterpiece. They love to do it for their readers. It was John's desire to help people understand God and His Word. So often Christians will not read the Bible because it's just difficult to grasp, so they give up. Or some are just simply not book readers. Okay, so since The Librarians is a modern day parable of the Old Testament, and let's see if you can recognize any of the characters. There are 4 main characters. Note that each individual existed in a different generation, so they did not meet each other. Or I think there is one that kind of got the chance to know the next librarian.
Part 1. Meso. Meso was different from the other children of the valley. He was an orphan. One day, Meso's parents took him on a hike along the long winding trail to the top of the ridge to see the beautiful panoramic view it offered of the entire valley. It had been several months since the last heavy rainfall, so the river had lost its ferocity. It flowed slowly, smoothly, inviting any on its shores to cool themselves while its current gently lapped against their legs. Meso and his parents accepted its invitation and waded out up to their knees. They splashed one another with the river's cold water and laughed as they struggled to keep their balance on the slippery rocks. Eventually they exited the river and sat on the lush grass that served as a bright border for the river as far as the young family could see. The grass was of a brighter green, wider blade, and sweeter taste than anywhere else in the forest. It was obvious that the closer something was to the river, the healthier it was. Dusk was approaching, and at Meso's persistent begging, his parents agreed to play one final game before returning down the trail to their home. Meso excitedly chose his favorite game, hide-and-seek, and quickly ran into the forest and waited for the grand climax, when either his parents would sneak up on him and yell, "Gotcha!" or they would give up trying to find him and loudly plead, "We give up! Show us where you are!" When he didn't immediately respond, they would become frightened and sternly warn him, "If you don't come out right now, you're going to be in big trouble." He would then magically appear from behind a tree or from several branches high in a nearby tree. Inevitably, they would be so relieved that he was safe that they would forget their earlier anger and grab him and tell him how clever he was and how much they loved him. Usually the game was over within 3 or 4 minutes. Meso couldn't estimate time that well, but it seemed that this time his parents were waiting a little longer than usual to begin their search for him. He began to feel uncomfortable. "I don't want to play anymore," he decided, and started walking back to the river. He saw his parents lying on the grass where he had left them when he ran into the forest to hide. Something didn't seem right. His walk slowed as he was overcome by feelings of caution and impending tragedy. His parents didn't move. He thought they had added something new to the game, and he wasn't sure he liked it. Sometimes his parents forgot that he was still a little boy and talked to him with words he didn't fully understand. He thought this addition to the game was also something he didn't fully understand. He called out, "Mama, Papa, I'm here." No response. "Stop! I don't like this game. I want to go home." Still no response. Meso approached his mother first. He laid his body softly on hers, like he did at home when he wanted to sleep with her. He started crying. He went over to his father and lay on him. Then he rolled over the top of his father and lay on the ground. Other than his parents' unresponsiveness, everything seemed normal. The grass was soft, and the river was humming in its soothing baritone voice. If he listened closely, he could hear frogs and insects providing a backup melody for the trees from which he had just come. He lay on his back and watched the clouds move with surprising speed across the sky. He had never seen them move so quickly. A large puff of cloud appeared and remained stationary as the other clouds were blown past it. Eventually, it was the only cloud in the sky. Rather than blowing it away, the wind was constantly fashioning it as if trying to find an appropriate shape. Mezo watched with fascination as he waited to see what the final form of the cloud would be. It reminded him of the times he'd played with clay and tried to mold different shapes. He hoped it might be a bird or maybe a lion, but it didn't seem to be forming an animal. It was a book. The cloud was worked and reworked by the wind until it took the shape of a book. The only books Mezo liked were ones with pictures. Mezo hoped that the cloud book would open and be filled with pictures, but it remained closed. Disappointed, Mezo fell asleep next to his parents. The search party found the 3 bodies several hours after darkness had fallen on the valley. The father was lying face down about 2 or 3 feet from the body of the mother, who was also lying face down. The little boy was lying on his back at her side, with one of her arms wrapped around him. The shouting of the searchers woke the boy, who gently placed his mother's arm on her chest. He sat up but said nothing. They asked Mezo what happened, but the boy only stared straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge their presence or their questions. Fearing that the boy may have fallen into a catatonic stupor, they discussed what they should do. The men's conversation was interrupted by the small voice of a child. "I'm hungry." Relieved that the boy had come out of his trance, they resumed their questioning of him. "I want to go home," was all he would say.
Thank you so much for listening. I am so excited to share more for our followers. Join us in the next episode of Lilies and Ravens podcast. God bless.